Guess you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit, and now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers, folks. Monday. Hope everybody had a good weekend. Hope everybody had a good Father's Day. All those fathers out there, look, fatherlessness is a scourge on our country and has been since the Great Society, really. Never really was like that in this country before then. But the problem has always been there in some shape or form. It's just on the end of society. So the job you do as a father is the most important job you'll ever do in your entire life. Never forget that. All right. Moving on. Listen, the polling I want to get into, and what I want to talk about, but we're going to do this in the second segment. What we're going to talk about is that this like strange consensus I've never seen before is emerging in polling right now. And what's weird about it, what's so strange? Typically, polls don't always come this close to agreement, but generally in the same ballpark. But general rule of thumb, and I know you haven't haven't heard this in a while. If you're a listener, you have probably heard this at some point if you're a longtime listener, but you haven't heard it in a while because polling is reported differently these days. People don't tell you what it means when a candidate is above 50%. People don't tell you what it means when a nominee is this far ahead this early, and they don't explain delegate rules to you and what that means with the polling. And similar is that they don't explain that generally every 20, and some research shows 25, but generally every 20 polls, there should be a wild outlier. And that's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing is polling being grouped into certain camps. Now, why do I think one of those camps has more credibility? One, because we've had some contests already, and the polls that, were closer to that, the results, or at least the state of those races leading up to some of these races were right. And they are all generally in the same camp. All right. Or maybe just in some races, there was one or two of them that weighed in, and that yet the other ones that are in those camps, no doubt, give them more credibility because they are closer to those who were right when they did weigh into those contests. But here's the strange thing about it. There are no outliers, really. There are different camps, and there's a minority camp for sure. The one that I think has more credibility, what is so strange is that these polls typically do not agree with each other. They don't. They typically contradict each other each cycle. And let me give you an example. Big data poll. Us at Big Data Poll. And Rasmussen, right? The ABC Washington Post poll. Typically not that close to each other. And yet they're in a consensus. You have the Morning Consult and us. Emerson, Morning Consult and Emerson College. Typically not in the same ballpark. And yet they, along with us and the other ones I mentioned, are all in this consensus. That's not typically the case. And what's so strange about this is it's not just the primary. When we're looking at the general election, it's the details of it, the demographics of it, right? I'm going to go over a couple of them in a little bit. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but even some of these newer ones, or some that are not so new, they've just revamped their brand, and I'll get into that later, all showing these things that we were talking about all last week. This younger, non-white vote. And by the way, it's worth noting for those who are trying to digest the results of the Harris poll on Friday and the Rasmussen poll today, which we'll go over. None of us ever had Trump ahead in 2020. Emerson, none of us. All right. So that's important to remember when we look at what we're seeing right now. But that's later, second segment. We will go over the nomination map for locals. You know this, and I meant to give this to you guys on members on YouTube too. But as of Sunday, everything that we know right now is on that nomination map. I still strongly suggest updating it or checking it every day for updates, amendments, changes, or just additions that we didn't have before. And I'll get into it in a little bit more detail later. But there are generally three contests that still there's a lot of questions about. The rest of it we kind of know from the rules. There's one where there are conflicting rules, and I'll go over that in more detail. Some places you need to specifically repeal some rules and others. So if there are conflicting rules, we need clarification on what the hell the state's going to do. I mean, at this point, I don't know why you haven't handled this already. You passed a new rule. You need to clarify which rule you're going to use, but we'll get into that. All right, so that's after that. First up, very small, short amount of time I want to spend on this, but you might have seen this debate or this debate over a debate with Joe Rogan and RFK versus, and one of these experts from, I'm going to play the clip. You're going to recognize him. And the question is whether or not experts, and this is the question I want to debate. It's not the question here. They're going to talk a little bit about this, but the question is whether experts, so-called experts, should debate high profile. And I say high profile because I get these requests from people on Twitter of like 10 followers all the time. Debate me over this poll. It's like, no. All right. But if there are other people, that are high profile and want to debate, I personally, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, throw them in the chat. I personally think debate is healthy for this country, any society that's supposed to be self-governing. And I don't think that experts should be put up on this pedestal where they're just immune from criticism and immune from needing to defend their positions. All right? Because sometimes what happens in an advanced society like the one we have is that these experts become badly compromised and they insulate themselves from having to defend their bad decisions, their incorrect expert analysis, or whatever it may be. And then you just hold them up as experts forever in perpetuity, and they never think that they're subject to criticism that could hurt their credibility. And the media, in this case, obviously, MSNBC, the media doesn't want to have them question. They don't want to debate. They don't want them to debate or hurt their credibility because, and we spoke about this last week, in a cartelized system, the media is a big part of this cartel, basically portraying this aura of credibility that you're not allowed to question. You're not allowed to think freely for yourselves. You're just supposed to listen to these experts. Put a mask on, even though weeks before, a month or two before, they told you masks don't work. Put a mask on. If you don't put a mask on, you can't go to school. If you don't put a mask on, you can't go grocery shopping. Take the vaccine. It stops infection. Does it? Take the vaccine. It stops infection. If you don't take the vaccine, you can't go to this concert. You can't go on this flight. You can't travel to here. You can't send your kids to school. Your kids can't go to school. You can't go to college. You can't get that job. Steve Cortez was fired from Newsmax because he refused to take the vaccine. Experts. All right, so let's listen to this and then seriously, throw your comments in there. I want to hear them. But I think at the end of the day, nobody who's a high-profile expert can debate every single person who challenges them. But when another high-profile person who is outspoken on it, for instance, wants to, I don't see why you would run and hide from that. All right, so here's the justification for why this expert wants to run and hide from Joe Rogan and RFK. All right, so let's go ahead and put this up. And we'll talk. I'm probably going to wind up stopping him because it's 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And I'm going to prod you with a question when I hear him say something dumb.
Well, so it's sad because I said I'm so fed up with the debate me, because it's not really about the debate. If it was about finding out information, as you said, you've already written about vaccines and autism. You've already spoken and written about COVID vaccines. I think you've been on MSNBC and other channels hundreds of times since the start of the pandemic. People can hear your views and the evidence you bring to this. So they're not actually interested in evidence. And it saddens me that you're a man who...
Well, see, let me just stop right there, because here's the problem. When money perverts the debate, when money perverts the research, when money perverts the science, when money perverts the data, then the research that Mehdi is referring to here is tainted. So how do you get beyond that? Listen, folks, when a media company or a super PAC who is trying to raise money from donors for a candidate who is seriously behind tells a pollster, get me this result because I need it for this reason. And that's the money. They're paying the bills. So this pollster, no matter how bad of a ding it could be to their credibility against all other public polls, except for one other that is also getting paid by the same people, against all the others, this pollster has no problem going out and showing an asinine, ridiculous, laughable result because the person who paid for the research wanted that result. There is always someone who is willing to sell themselves. Listen, whoring yourself is the oldest profession in the world, the history of the world and human civilization. Whoring yourself, whether you're a woman who's a prostitute, and actually that is the oldest profession, prostitution, but whoring yourself in different ways is certainly possible. And believe me, there will never be a shortage of people willing to whore themselves. So what do you do when that happens? Climate change, another perfect example. Who funds all of these studies that constantly are being referred to as the experts? Who funds them? And what happens when these people fund somebody that comes up with a result they don't like? 2 words, folks: polar bears. Look what they did to that woman. Destroyed her. Everybody knows what result they want. Everybody knows what Big Pharma wanted those studies to say. Everybody knows what the NIH wanted those studies to say. Everybody knows what the FDA wanted those studies to say. Everybody knows what the World Health Organization and people like this from Texas Children's Hospital wanted those studies to say. Mehdi says over here, they're not interested. It's not about the truth. They're not interested in the truth. Projection at its finest. Because when a study comes out and says masking and even N95s, respirators, they just don't work. They wholly ignore them. When this guy comes out and talks ad nauseum about how natural immunity is not enough, they don't want to hear it. And then the studies come out 6 months later, completely contradicting their so-called expertise, and they don't want to defend it. They don't want to talk about it. So it's not about getting to the truth. Well, how else would you do it if the system is totally corrupt? Just keep that in mind. How else can you penetrate this aura of credibility or damage this aura of credibility that the cartel has given to them, has constructed for them, because it is a construct. It's not real. That's true of foreign policy experts in DC. It's true of everybody. What are their track records like? Have they actually been right about these things? What do you do when they're not?
basically has saved lives abroad with the vaccines you've developed, whereas RFK has contributed to a culture, a vaccine misinformation culture, that has led to the deaths, as you say, of hundreds of thousands of lives. And yet,
Fallacy. Both things can be true. Both things can be true. He could have developed vaccines that saved lives and could have been wholly wrong about these two vaccines in question in particular.
he's the one being celebrated by tech billionaires like Musk and Jack Dorsey, while you're being smeared and defamed. And I would say, I don't know if you've agreed to debate or not. My advice is not.
I just want to say, yeah, we all know what your advice is, Maddie. Did anybody care about Dr. McCullough being smeared? Did anybody care about the Dr. Robert Malone, literally one of the inventors of the mRNA vaccine? Did anybody care that Dr. Robert Malone was maligned, smeared, financially, personally attacked, lost an enormous amount of money, lost an enormous amount of societal stature, right? All at the behest of Fauci, because Fauci wanted these people destroyed. This is something that happens in every game, every sector, every industry. It doesn't matter. If the powerful thinks that you're credible and that the public views you as a credible source of information, and by the way, this is what's happening to me right now. We're being smeared and defamed because they're afraid of us. They know the right, particularly, trusts us and trusts our data. So they have to try to personally and professionally attack me so that you will stop trusting the numbers that we are putting out. This happens in every industry. Nobody cared when they did that to Robert Malone. Now Medicare's here. Come on, man. It's so dishonest. It's so dishonest.
People might find that surprising because I wrote a book about debate. But I just think there's a time and a place for a debate. I don't think a historian of World War II should debate a Holocaust denier. I just think, that's my analogy here. Like, I don't think.
What a terrible analogy. First of all, that is, if Professor Spangler is listening. I know, Spangler, it's been like 15, 20 years. I don't know, but beware of historical inaccurate analogies, ladies and gentlemen. Beware of historically inaccurate analogies. Professor Spangler, thank you for the life lesson.
I think these debates between experts and cranks do anything other than elevate the cranks.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are certain things you debate. I understand what a debate about 18th century Enlightenment philosophy is, and debating Rousseau and Bishop Barclay.
Yeah, which you're not an expert in. Right? So wait a minute. So now, because he's the co-director of the Center for Vaccine Development at Texas Children's Hospital, he now is an expert on 18th century Enlightenment philosophy. Unbelievable. If he was, he wouldn't have quoted basically the wrong century. And I mean, that's just the truth. I mean, that came, Rousseau was different, but a lot of others that are the basis of the Enlightenment philosophy span more than that. But in any event, you're not an expert in that. So why would anyone want to, he's deflecting here. Why would anybody want to debate him over 18th century Enlightenment philosophy? He's not an expert in 18th century. Like, he just thinks because he's so damn educated, or what do we say now on Inside the Numbers? He's so credentialed that he's qualified to debate you on anything other than what he's actually qualified to debate you on. It's unbelievable.
I understand what political debates are, but in science, we don't typically do debates. What we do is we write scientific papers, we present our findings in front of a critical audience of our peers to solicit their input and suggestions, but one doesn't typically debate science, maybe the one-off discussion of evolution versus creationism and that sort of thing, but that's not what we do in science. And so that's problem number one. And problem number two is to debate with RFK Jr. I've discussed.
Wait. Let's just take problem number one before we get into RFK Jr. So, if you are, let's say, this guy, a vaccine expert, vaccine scientist, and you, based on some new pandemic, decide to completely throw out everything that science has established on the immunity system, right? The immune system. And you do it without significant support in this in the research papers and the scientific findings and the studies. And in science, you're not going to debate that. You're just going to move forward. Nobody who has knowledge of decades and decades and decades of scientific research on natural immunity, for instance, nobody is allowed to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, we need to debate the research. That's not how science works. Newton just came out with it. He didn't have to on his laws. He came out with gravity and thermodynamics, and he didn't have to debate his findings and defend his findings. The hell is this guy talking about? We don't debate in science. Well, that's terrifying. Does he understand what the word debate means? I'm really not sure.
This issue with him many times by phone and by email. And the problem is, he just keeps on moving the goalposts. I mean, first it was the measles mumps rubella vaccine that caused autism. What's that?
Moving the goalposts is literally what conspiracy theorists do.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, and so then it was.
That's interesting you said that, Mehdi, because the Russia collusion hoax, the Russia collusion conspiracy theory, which resulted in you getting House Majority Whip Steve Scalise and 4 others shot while they practiced for a charity baseball game. That's what you constantly did. He was a traitor, right? You were going to get him for being a traitor. Donald Trump was a traitor to the nation. He colluded with a foreign power and stole the election. You remember that? But then all of a sudden it wasn't about that because Mueller couldn't find that. And you moved the goalpost and you moved from treason to obstruction of justice. But then you couldn't get that. So you went from treason to obstruction of justice to a process crime, potentially not being honest or forthright with a federal agent. Manafort was, in fact, treason. But of course, he wasn't charged with anything like that, was he? He was charged with what John Podesta's brother and everybody in Washington have done for years, which is violate FARA and not pay his taxes right. It's a far cry from treason, but as a conspiracy theorist, you moved the goalpost, didn't you? So let's just take that first. Let's go into the next one here. And by the way, let me just say this. I don't think there is evidence to support that vaccines, are the cause of autism. I just don't see it. If you think you see something I don't, I'd be happy to look at it. But I've looked at dozens of sources that people who believe this have sent to me in the past, and in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not an expert on this topic, but in some way, shape, or form, I've seen those sources challenged. That being said, there is no doubt as a father that I put my kids on a extended vaccine schedule because it's very simple. You jab your children with 5 vaccines in a day. They come home feeling like shit for 2 days. You do it on a more elongated schedule and they're just fine. And then there's the second part to this. Let's not pretend that something hasn't caused the explosion of autism. This is part of the problem. They use okay, so this didn't do it. But very clearly, folks, poorly regulated big pharma has caused widespread problems, mental and physical problems in this country because they weren't regulated properly and because the system is deeply, deeply corrupted. When 20 years ago, the VA first gave me an opiate, they told me it was easy to get off of it. At the end of the day, it was the hardest thing in my life, one of the hardest things in my life I had to do. But I remember it like it was yesterday. These people, backed by the pharmaceutical companies, back then, for those of you old enough to remember, maybe some of you aren't, had created a difference between dependency and addiction. They just fabricated it. And guys in white lab coats like this guy were paid to tell Congress, to tell the FDA, to tell you that shit was safe. It was not. We just now, for decades and decades and decades of research, used to say that depression was a chemical imbalance. It's not. We pumped children all through the 90s with Ritalin and antidepressants. So what is causing this increase in autism? You're just not allowed to talk about it. So even if there was some ironclad research out there, does anybody seriously believe, or if there was ironclad research that it was linked to vaccines, which again, I personally don't believe, but even if there was, does anybody seriously believe they would allow you to debate that possibility? These people have poisoned us for decades and decades and decades, and the system has allowed it to happen.
The thimerosal preservative in vaccine, then spacing vaccines too close together, and then alum in vaccines. Then it was the HPV vaccine that they said caused infertility or autoimmunity. And then vaccines cause something called chronic illness. So you're always kind of playing this Pyrrhic game of whack-a-mole. You knock something down and it pops up, or moving the goalposts. And it's
moving the goalpost again. Did they not move the goalpost with the mRNA vaccine? It prevents transmission. No, it doesn't. Okay, you'll get less sick. Everybody who's got COVID right now, it's because of those damn natural immunity people. And vaccine immunity is better than natural immunity. No, it's not in the papers. Okay, well, you still should get it. I mean, who moved the goalposts here? I mean, they do exactly. You can't accuse someone of doing something that you routinely do. That's called projection. Projection. Or as Barnes says, confession through projection.
And it turns out it's very unproductive, and it's also pretty exhausting as well.
Oh, God forbid. God forbid. It's exhausting that you have to defend yourself for telling untruths. Anyway.
Exhausting, unproductive. It's disingenuous as well, and kind of ludicrous. I mean, Robert Kennedy Jr. is an environmental lawyer. I wouldn't expect him to debate me on environmental law, and I don't see why anyone would think that you...
Why not? Why not? You're a high-profile person if you think that he's wrong about something. So when Mehdi brings people on his show that he thinks isn't telling the truth, for instance, Matt Taibbi. You're not actually a journalist, Mehdi. Yet you brought Matt Taibbi on over the Twitter files and you debated him. You challenged him. You're not a journalist like Matt is. Let's be real. You're not a journalist like Schellenberger is. You are a hack anchor on MSNBC. You're not a real journalist. So next time somebody comes on your show to talk about a topic like the law, and you're not a lawyer, are you going to not challenge what they're saying? The truth is, he would if he disagreed with it. Personally, like RFK disagrees with many of his, views and positions. But if he agrees with it, he'll just sit back and push it because that's what hacks do. So let's get some of your comments here and see what some of you get. I mean, if we don't debate experts, then what in Sam hell are we doing here? And actually, before, I just want to go back because I think hot take on this is Sean Parnell. All right. Robust debate about issues of the day is crucial, but these authoritarian hacks on the left don't want to debate anything. Just shut up and trust the authority. They want you to question nothing. And it's totally ridiculous. This is what I think Sean's got the hot take on this, because this is about people who believe in authority. They are, when we're doing Vardir, for instance, we profile different people and their personalities and their belief systems. That is a authoritarian. Whether there are many different kinds of authoritarians, but they believe you should just shut up and believe the experts. They're terrible if you're a defendant, because they're going to just look at the prosecutor like the so-called authority in the room. And you've got to believe the authority in the room. The authority is always the good guys, right? So that's ultimately what this is the debate about. It's not science. It's not a debate about whether science debates, which is just crazy to me. All right. Tell poor Bernini, right? When science didn't debate, he was burned alive. That's what happens when people don't debate. And you're just supposed to shut up and listen to authority. They burn you alive. All right. So, or worse, I mean, that's the way these societies go. But this is really about people who don't, like Sean Parnas, people who are unwilling, especially with people's track record, so-called experts' track record these days. Their track records suck. They don't tell the truth, and they're not always right. So this is about what Sean is saying it's about. This is about people who recognize that and are not willing to take the word of so-called experts or authority figures without critically thinking for themselves. Because in many of these things, folks, you don't need to be an expert in order to know whether or not an expert is telling you the truth or the authority is telling you the truth. You didn't need, for instance, to be an expert. And I got to be careful here. You did, because listen, YouTube changed some of their rules, but they didn't change them all. You don't need to be an expert. Let's use a different topic here. In the law, for instance, to see a double standard. You don't need to be an expert in public polling, like we talk about all the time, to know when a pollster is constantly wrong and when a pollster has, is more wrong than right, or more right than wrong, or whether one's just always right, always wrong. You don't need to be an expert in polling to know that. You can observe that. So, yeah, I mean, look, this is what I'm talking about. This is where it comes down to. So, Lori, this is the thing that drives me nuts. And Lori said, I will never defer to authority again. It costs people their freedom, wealth, and health. First of all, you put it better than I ever could. I couldn't have said it better myself. So in their world, though, Lori, you're never supposed to look back and say, damn, they lied to me. The intelligence experts lied to me about WMDs. The public health officials and experts lied to me about COVID. The election experts lied to me about 2020. And on and on and on. The media. You're certainly not all, experts in media production. Did you have to be to know that the media lied to you about Russia collusion? That the media lied to you about Michael Brown? Did you need to be an expert in that? Duke LaCrosse? And on and on. I mean, seriously, guys, book right over there. The countless, I mean, so you could call them lies, or at the end of the day, they were just proven to be false, that the media has colluded with many of these experts to tell you that Randy Street put in seriously. Now, what are we up to? 3 volumes in Randy Street series? These books are filled with lies. And because you're not an expert, you're just supposed to shut up and not question them. So the question I'm asking is, if they're not willing to debate it, are we just going to continue like this, again, to use the word perpetuity? Are we just going to continue like this in perpetuity, where people like Mehdi have their shows and they put on these people over and over again? And then there's independent media and they put on their people over and over again? Or are we going to have debates where listen, somebody's wrong and somebody's right? Doesn't matter whether it's vaccines cause autism, or COVID vaccines do not stop transmission, or there was widespread election. All of these issues could not harm us as a society forever if we would hold these debates with people that each side could choose as their champion of the issue or position. You know what's so sad about all this? I remember, I'm old enough, God forgive me, I'm older than I'd like to be. But there's one good thing about being as old as I am, even though still, never mind. There's one good thing. And that is, I'm old enough to remember when it was not always like this in America. It just wasn't. Yep, there you go. It's more, it's over and over and over, Joel. Over and over and over. I remember it was not always like this in America. And it used to be that we all had our different points of view and we constantly debated each other. That's how cable news became such a big thing. And yes, network news had done it, started to do it. But Turner was brilliant in having a 24-hour news channel. And on that news channel, sides were debated constantly. And then Fox News realized that, or Roger Ailes realized. Fox News didn't realize shit because Fox News is run. Tucker is hilarious, by the way. That last episode. And then the women who run the network wigged out or flipped out or whatever. It's so funny. But Roger Ailes realized that Turner's network was slanted badly to the left and was excluding more than 50% of the country. Because at that time, it was certainly more than 50% right, even though registration still skewed Democratic, didn't matter. The views were certainly majority Republican views. And so he started Fox News. And people debated stuff, folks. Like back in the 2000 election, it was all right to disagree. And the beauty of America is a Yowman can prove that they have more knowledge in something or can be on the right side of history than a House of Lords, than a house filled with experts and privileged and super smart people. A nation of Yowman. See, I find this whole thing about the untouchable experts completely un-American. Antithetical to American principles. Completely antithetical. This nation hated that crap. Hated it. Because you're credentialed does not make you honest, doesn't make you smart, and certainly doesn't make you right all the time. It just means you went through the system's artificial process of becoming credentialed. But it doesn't mean you always have the right answer, and it doesn't mean you're always telling the truth. So yeah, experts and high-profile people cannot debate every single person who challenges them to a debate, but Joe Rogan has the biggest audience in podcast history. RFK is a presidential contender in one of the two major parties in this country. He's from a family that those people used to find to be aristocratic. And by the way, I wish I had time, but on Wednesday, we are going to briefly bring up some stuff that RFK is under major attack. And another one that's coming, and you're going to see a lot more of it, is that RFK is basically making stuff up about his uncle. And we're going to talk about whether or not JFK, whether there's evidence to support some of the stuff that he says his uncle believed and said and did. All right. I think it's hilarious that so many people, this is what I'm talking about. They're so experts. They're such experts, so experts that they know better than someone's family member about what that family member believed. This is how out of control this system of credentials has become. And again, the beginning part of that video was very, very, very revealing. I understand debating 18th century enlightenment. I even understand political debate. Oh, thank you so much. This is insane. And then once they're credentialed in something, they think they're just smarter than everybody. I gotta say this before we move on to the polls, because we are going to move on. When the hell did we stop remembering that most doctors and people like him have God syndrome? They do. They think they're better than everybody else. They think they're smarter than everybody else. They're arrogant SOBs. Can we stop playing for a second? I know tons of great doctors, nice people. I do. And they hate most of the people they work with. These people think they're on a different plane of existence than you. And we're supposed to just shut up and do everything they say. Sean is 100% correct. That's really what's at the heart of that right there. Whether or not trust the experts. That's right, Lizelle. Trust the experts. That's it. Just shut up and trust the experts. All right, so time to go to the first one. Should we do Rasmussen first? No, we shouldn't. Let's talk about this polling consensus. And there's a couple of things I want to point out. First and foremost, this is Big Village. I'm doing an insane amount of research. I just want to point out to you something real quick. Gen Z. Robert and I were talking about this, have been talking about this for a while now. All adults, if the 2024 presidential election were held today between the following candidates, who would you vote for? Donald Trump, the Republican, 43. Joe Biden, or 42.7. Joe Biden, the Democrat, 38.7. I would not vote, 12.6. Not sure, 6. I wish they would have put third party and then I would not vote, but you can clearly see the difference here. If the 2024 presidential election were held today between the following candidates, who would you vote for? Joe Biden, the Democrat, 39.0. Ron DeSantis, the Republican, 36.0. I would not vote, 16.2. Not sure, 8.7. Let's move over to the Gen Z column. Actually, back up. Let's move to the females. Donald Trump among females, 38.6. Joe Biden, 40.2. Joe Biden, the Democrat, among females, 39.6 against Ron DeSantis, who gets 31.5 among females. Independents, Ron DeSantis carries them 23.3 to 17.2. However, Donald Trump carries them by a much larger margin, 33.9 to 17.1. 40% of independents say they would not vote if it was Joe Biden versus Ron DeSantis, while only a third would say, roughly a little over a third would say that if it was Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Still a massive number, but independents are like this when they're this early, when it's this early. Now let's move to the Gen Z, shall we? Gen Z, 18 to 25. Who the hell is that? Ignoring it. Gen Z, 18 to 25. We do 18 to 24 and 25 to 29 because we like to stay consistent for you with the exit polls. But nevertheless, we're still looking at that younger age group. Donald Trump, 36.4. Joe Biden, 38.3. Against Ron DeSantis, however, Joe Biden gets 41 and Ron DeSantis only gets 21.7. I'm going to hammer this day in and day out until it changes. And it will only change if the social bias campaign, cognitive bias campaign, the fear campaign, social bias is really a cognitive bias, but the social desirability bias campaign that they're waging on the country right now based on fear, that's the only way these numbers are going to change. And if they did, it most likely would change with the baby boomers, who Ron DeSantis does almost as well as Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. However, you might notice that Joe Biden gets about a point higher against Donald Trump with baby boomers than he does against Ron DeSantis. That is the one and only category when we ever see that happening. The 42 to 57, Trump carries 45 to 38, when Ron DeSantis only carries at 39 to 37.5. Millennials, Trump is actually carrying 42 to 37, whereas Ron DeSantis is losing them by 8. Younger, non-white. Why do I find this so damn important? It's the future. The country is not going to be majority white much longer. White people are not reproducing. Republicans, 82.3 say they would vote for Trump. Only 73.6 would vote for Ron DeSantis. So for all this talk about Donald Trump losing a chunk of Republicans because it's Donald Trump and people can't stand him. He's as popular as a venereal disease. I keep seeing I swear to God, talking points go out. They all say the same things. That's how you know there's literally a talking point memo for the week. Yet he is carrying more Republicans because DeSantis has begun to hurt himself with the MAGA Republican. He's hurting himself with Trump's voters, diehard voters, who otherwise liked him before. How do you know? Decline among men, now down to 41. Trump is at 47. And Joe Biden is gaining, is almost 2 points higher among men. This is the thing. It's not just name recognition, because you can see Joe Biden is actually a higher vote share. That is a strong indication that it's not just name recognition. Okay. Now let's stop the screen share. Let's go to the new one by Rasmussen. If I do the image, it's going to be so difficult for you to see. So let me do the article, and then from the article, we'll use my Platinum account to go into the actual demographics, which I have. All right. And we're going to look at the margin. This is after indictment. Did Donald Trump lose, is what Mark Mitchell and the folks at Rasmussen are trying to see. Did Donald Trump lose any general election support? Okay. Patriot Power Sidekick. Use promo code TPP10. We're going to do that real soon, actually. This is Google's scary as shit, isn't it? I'm not going to lie. I just bought this for the backyard, or one of them. I didn't buy that. I bought Chase Lounge shares. It's terrifying. And I did it on another computer, by the way. Even after former President Donald Trump was indicted on federal charges, he still leads Joe Biden by 6 points. Latest Rasmussen reports, national telephone and online survey finds that 45% of likely U.S. voters would vote for Trump in a 2024 rematch, while 39% would vote for Biden. Another 12% say they'd vote for some other candidate. Big Village was 43-39. Very, very close. We, by the way, are 45-38. Almost identical. Almost identical to Rasmussen reports. And how many on ours said they wouldn't? So we have 9% for a third-party candidate. All right. So, and one of the biggest questions this year, folks, is will that shrink? And that depends on whether third-party candidates are going to be able to put forward decent candidates. But the share of a third-party vote is going to go up if this continues to be the way it is in this country. A majority of voters believe Joe Biden is a worse president than most recent presidents, compared to 32% who think Biden is better than most recent presidents. 15% say Biden is about the same as most recent presidents. Revelation in a congressional investigation of alleged influence peddling by Biden and his family may have increased public perception of Biden as corrupt. 45% of voters believe the Biden administration is more corrupt than most recent administrations, while 37% think the Biden administration is less. 14% say the level of corruption is about the same. And it's sad that we just accept corruption like this. It's sad. Well, 65% of Democrats believe the Biden administration is less corrupt. That view is only shared by 14% of Republicans and 29% of voters who are not affiliated with either party. And we don't need to get into the specifics of this stuff. Let's get more into the general election. Trump carries unaffiliated voters by 20 points. Biden has a 1-point lead among women, while men prefer Trump by 11, 49-38. In a 2024 rematch against Biden, Trump would get the votes of 48% of whites. This, to me, is just, it happens. Statistical noise happens. 42% of blacks and 39% of other minority votes. I would check to see if my black too young. 39% of whites, but it doesn't matter because, as Sean Trendy even has explained to many people who criticize stuff like this, it tends to work out. Trump is not going to get 48% of whites. Whites on panels and whites on the phone are more liberal than they are in real life. So even us, our white vote is only, we have whites 51.2 to 34.1. We have blacks 62.0 flat for Biden to 17.7 for Trump, which I think Trump can do. I think Trump can do 20% of the black vote. I do. Hispanics, we have 41 to 36. So, and Asians are the only one that Biden really leads with, 52.5 to 18.3. Trump is very popular among Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, which, by the way, apparently we found to be true. Emerson also found to be true if you look at the California poll, where there are a lot of Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders in the electorate. Breaking down the electorate by income categories, a majority of voters earning less than $50,000 a year think the Biden administration is more corrupt. In a rematch, Biden gets his highest share of the vote from voters who have an annual income above $200,000, and that's 69%. While Trump gets 57% among those earning 30 to 50. That's Trump's core right there. And even the 50 to 100 is good for Trump. The main difference is the less than 30,000 that Trump is doing so well with. Normally, that is the vote that Democrats have been able to consistently hold on to. And actually, let's go down and let's just see where they're at. Come on, get out of here with this. Biden's at the top. Okay. Where's the little scrolly? Come on, scrolly. There we go. If we go over here, it's probably somewhere around here. There it is. 30. See what I mean? Trump is actually carrying them 47 to 37. And with us, we have it at, this is the big deal. This is a major deal. And people cannot BS about this. We have it 48-37. See what I mean? When it's like this strange consensus, folks, that's crazy. That's crazy close. That's a Democratic constituency, folks. Always has been. The fact that Trump is leading with them in every single poll is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Woo! All right. Anyway, yeah, damn right. I don't know if David's listening, but damn right they polled already, David. They're freaking out. They're terrified of you, David. Terrified. And this is why I understand that the former president's got his stuff going on. I can't even imagine what it's like to be Donald Trump. It must be horrible. I'm serious. Horrible. Horrible. Once upon a time, you had it made, and then it's just unbelievable. But he still should line up his allies going forward, especially if, I think they always were going to charge him with sedition, guys, because that's the foolproof way to remove him from the ballot. And I'm reading, Rich, reading these numbers to you, and this is why they absolutely have no choice. It's like, they do have a choice, and the choice is just to lose, but they're not going to do that because they are a status quo regime that is desperately trying to hold on to power, and these people are authoritarian by nature, so they're not going to let the democratic process play out, at least not with extreme attempts to stop it. By not using democratic means. These numbers are not numbers you ever see for Republicans. Ever. By the way, with that 30 to under 30,000 among, I can't believe how close we had that to Rasmussen. 48 to 37. That's just, that's incredible. If you look at DeSantis, he's more like a traditional Republican, and that is with the 30,000 and below, scrolling over. He's losing them 40 to 29. Even among high school or less, people who have just a high school degree or less, Joe Biden is still carrying them 39 to 28. So when I have been seeing these things, and I'll put that up NL because I know I've heard Robert's argument, but I just think that they're willing to do anything. These numbers don't happen. I don't think I can state this. I don't think I can stress this enough. These numbers don't happen. for Republicans. They don't get that much non-white vote. They don't win the underclass. They don't do that well against among Gen Z voters. They don't do this. If they can cobble together a bare winning coalition, they do it on the backs of people who make over $100,000 and older folks. I just don't know when this is going to dawn on everybody. This is not what happens. So to me, as like a numbers guy, I've always looked at the numbers and just, again, I'm not a lawyer. I've always just looked at the numbers and said, government's corrupt. Government is about power. The Democrats, as many people have said over and over again, this is not JFK's Democratic Party. And even so, by the way, I mean, FDR used the power of government to persecute his political opponents. A lot of this isn't really anything new. It's just that they're doing it so blatant now. It's so obvious now. That's the real difference. And also, they were afraid to tamper with the democratic process in the past this blatantly and this overtly. Now I think there's two things. One, they think you're just so stupid and compliant. You're weak. And two, they're scared. Now it's about fear. They were able to derail this guy's administration once. And if they let him back in again, he's going to go buck wild on them. So to them is about survival. So they don't really care what Rubicon you have to cross. They don't care. These numbers don't happen. They don't happen. They know it. I was talking to a couple of people over the weekend, actually. And one Republican guy was basically like, because we were talking about the New Hampshire poll. And his argument, and by the way, he's not a Trumper. His argument was they have to beat him in Iowa. If they lose Iowa, it's over that quick. Because Ted Cruz won it, barely won it, but then he just went on to get his ass kicked. The polling is so bad in the rest of the states, there aren't many opportunities. There has to be some stunner from the jump. And then a Democrat that I was talking with heard me the other day with Barnes on What Are the Odds say that they're not worried about anyone but Trump. And he wanted to talk about that. And they even think, and I think this is nuts. And I showed them the poll. It's not, I think Ron DeSantis would carry Florida. And, maybe it would be, I don't know, maybe it would be closer than people think. But right now we have DeSantis up over Biden by 8. But they are so unafraid of him. They actually think they can carry Florida. I kid you not. I kid you not. They think that the COVID thing was a plan in the primary, but that they're gonna strangle him with it. And also the abortion ban. They think they can do him dirty on the abortion ban. I don't know about that. I really think that's kind of crazy. I really don't think DeSantis would lose Florida to Joe Biden at all. But that's how not concerned they are. And at the end of the day, I think that Florida is different because even though DeSantis's coalition is it's a Bush coalition, but that's fine in Florida. Even now, it's not fine in the Rust Belt and in many other areas because these states have changed so much. You cannot win on the backs of, 50 over. Can't do it. You can't get killed among voters who are, or I even say 45, below 45. You just can't do it. By the way, curious, one thing I didn't look at with Trump was age. Let me look at age real quick. Trump is, they do the 18 to 39, and I wish they would break it down a little bit more. 18 to 39 is only Biden 41-35. 40 to 64 is Trump 49 to 38. And 65 plus is 51 to 40, which sounds about right to me. The seniors, a lot of, look, man, the Chinese killed a lot of Trump voters. It's the truth of it. That and just demographics are changing, That's a good question. Laura, you were way ahead of me on that. She grabbed that and put that right up. They do not post detailed crosstabs. It doesn't meet to me. Several of these polls do not meet basic standards of disclosure. They do not. And like even the Harvard Harris poll, they'll put out the PDF, guys, but then you can get a very, very detailed version of their crosstabs. In fact, it's so big, it's annoying. That's why we love the tool we use, which is MarketSite. We would highly recommend to any other pollster out there that is listening. With MarketSite, you can just easily control a very, very, very large crosstab. Listen, I don't want to go into trashing people's stuff, but I will say that we had to change data sources quite a bit. And we had to change data sources, Laura. We had to change data sources quite a bit. And the one that certain pollster David is using was a major problem. And we would have gotten a lot incorrect in 2020. We feel, and you know this because how many lists did we scrub, that some of the alternative sources out there have some really, really, really bad data. Not good at all. So, yeah, they did mention this. Again, we have DeSantis up by 8 in Florida. But they did mention this, that they're going to appeal to people that he did not complete his term. I just don't know. In the state of Florida, guys, I just don't know whether I don't know how that's going to work. But the Biden administration, or the Biden people, it's not administration, the Biden people are right when they say you cannot glean anything from his midterm victory. They're 100% correct about that. It doesn't matter. It's a gubernatorial election, and it was a midterm. And the gubernatorial election, in my view, is more significant than it being a midterm. The fact it's a gubernatorial election is significant. All politics is local. Tip O'Neill, what he was talking about was gubernatorial elections. They do not have the strict partisan voting index that national races do. So they are correct about that. They know and I've been telling you that. They know what I have been telling you for months and months and months is 100% true. There is no chance in hell he would win a presidential election in Florida by 20 points. Not going to happen. Nobody. It's not going to happen. And by the way, look who was missing from the electorate between 2022 and a presidential cycle. A lot of younger people he didn't do as well with. A lot of other different demographic groups. I mean, African Americans fell off the map. It was white and it was older. Or it was more white and more older than it should have been. Combined. Both together, I mean. Talking about nesting variables here. All right, let's take a real quick break. We'll come back. We'll go over another one. Again, it's this universe that is so close to each other and they never really are. You know, we're not always that overlapping with Rasmussen or Harris X or Harvard or Emerson or damn sure not the Morning Consult. I mean, never. And yet this crazy stuff is happening. And then you have, like what David said, you have these polls that are, they're the other category of polling, David, along with a few others that are in their it's not even a consensus because it's so small. But they're the minority wing, and you know, they did well in 2022, or better than I don't know if well is the better way to say. They did better than they did in recent elections, but you can kind of pull that off in a midterm, and using its methodology that can fly in a midterm, but it will not fly in a presidential election cycle, and they'll be wrong again. So, plus, you and I have privately talked about this, David. You know, I mean, I would never be on Capitol Hill shopping my polls. All right. It just wouldn't happen. You're not supposed to do that as a public pollster. So university pollsters should not be on Capitol Hill shopping their polls and giving talking points to political parties. All right. If it's 2014, you should not be up there with Paul Ryan. If it's 2016, you should not be up there with Never Trumpers and Hillary Clinton's people. And on and on and on and on. That is not acceptable behavior for a public pollster. Anyway, moving on. Let's go take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll get into the other ones. Are you prepared for the summer heat? Oh, my Lord, folks. What if the power went out? Authorities fear that extremists are targeting the power grid. That's according to Time magazine. But forget about that. We have a tropical storm underway coming up right now. There's a host of things that can go on, even other great powers. And if just 9 key substations were to go down, it would knock out power across the country for up to 18 months. Our lives would be frozen in time the moment the power went out. And now it's summer, we'd be sweating to death. That's why you need a solar generator. The new Patriot Generator 2000X is portable, but it's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, even your fridge. And right now you can go to 4patriots.com and get one for 10% off if you use the code TPP10 at checkout. And this code is for your first purchase only, so make it count. That's 4patriots.com. Use the code TPP10 and get yourself a new Patriot Power Generator today. And of course, that code does work on many, many other things, but make it, like I said, make it count because it's for your first purchase. And before we get back to the program here, let me tell you about a great deal from our friends at Jam and Bean. Patriot owned, also happen to be incredible roasters. Whether you are a K-Cup guy or girl, or you like to roast your own coffee, you want to check out different maple syrups, popcorns, these amazing gourmet popcorns. Go to jamandbean.com right now. Use the promo code TPP40 at checkout when you're getting a new subscription to coffee, popcorn, whatever it may be. New subscription using the TPP40 code will get you 40% off right off the jump, right off the top of the subscription. Plus, every month, the renewal, you will still get 10% off using that discount code. So again, TPP40 at checkout at jamandbean.com. Popcorn, the sour cream and chives is so good. And TPP40 at checkout, and that'll knock your fee down 40%. You'll still get 10% off on every subsequent renewal. And also, don't forget, send us your feedback. We'd love to hear your feedback, particularly about Jam and Bean. All right. But anything we like to hear your feedback on. All right. Ooh, you bought the hoodies? You bought the hoodies, Rich? The hoodies are super, super comfortable. If you're talking about the People's Pundit hoodies, they're awesome. It's hot, but you know what? Maybe we'll get the...
I just want to say, if you do buy them and you like your hoodie baggy, like I do, I like to be enveloped in it, order a size up. Because they do fit.
Yeah, see, I like mine that fit. I like mine that fits, but she's right. If you like hoodies a little bit baggy, order them another size higher. I like mine that fit, that fit right. And man, they're cozy. I have a colleague or a peer or whatever, and his wife is a fan of the show. And when we first started offering these hoodies, she grabbed one right up, and he says, dude, she's been wearing this hoodie for 10 days. It's that comfortable. They're super cozy. You were just making a bad Gen Z joke? Okay, gotcha. All right, let's go to the next one. Key results from the Harvard-Harris poll, which I took it upon myself to go forward here. Boy, did Team DeSantis spend all day Friday trying to take something I said out of context so they didn't have to talk about the 14%? By the way, and shame on some of you people for even believing that at first. Not you viewers. I'm talking about influencers. Shame on you for even believing. But in any event, what on earth are you doing? Roman, get your hand off the board. He's playing with the...
How did you know that was him?
Of course, that's Roman pushing buttons on the cool little Stream Deck thing. That's what that's exactly. Because I thought I could hear him ooh, All right, so Trump is still the clear. Trump is the clear GOP primary front runner. DeSantis is still the runner-up, but Pence gained 4 points. I'm curious to see whether or not Pence gains in our polling. I can tell you in some of the state and district stuff we're doing, Pence did gain, and that was a bit of a. It's weird. It's like him and Tim Scott, got localized bumps. We didn't see a bump in the national yet, but we're going to go out there and do it. Like I said on Friday, we would love to get a new poll out by the end of the month. But, do us a favor. Go to bigdatapoll.com/public / hyphen whatever. It's in the link is in the description. Public polling project. Contribute what you can. Share it far and wide. Because, folks, if everybody just gave a buck, our audience is big enough. If everybody just gave a buck, we would be able to poll every month at least. But as of right now, I don't mind using some of the YouTube memberships and local stuff. I mean, this is what we do, so we've been doing it. But we've done it twice now before we've hit the target for one. So Laura will kill me if we don't take it down a notch. All right. So, make sure you do share it with like-minded people who this is the funny thing about some people. Like, oh, this is it's just ridiculous. All of these Trump-funded polls, and they're talking about us, Emerson. This is crazy. Emerson has a grant. Harvard has a grant. We are crowdsourced, and we spend our own money. I've never gotten a dollar from anybody. I don't know what these people are talking about. Where do they come up with this shit? Where do they come up with this stuff? Anyway, this is very, very bad news for DeSantis, because even though he has all this money and infrastructure he's going to be building, he doesn't seem to have any votes, and he's one of the few, along with Nikki Haley, who got no discernible bump. At least Tim Scott and Mike Pence, we have been able to see some localized bumps. And Vivek Ramaswamy's down now again to 3% here. I'm curious where he would be on our national, but he's gained consistently in our national poll and then kind of leveled off at 5%. And when we look around the country at some different states, especially diverse ones are very insightful, but different districts, there is a cap for Vivek at this point right now. He has a limited appeal. That being said, it does appear that DeSantis is one of the few in the second tier candidate slot, because everybody's second tier compared to there's only one person in the top tier lane in this nomination. Normally you have multiple tiers: top tier, second tier, bottom tier. This time there isn't that in a crowded race. There is a single person as a top tier candidate, and then everybody else is bottom tier because their support is so low. If you would go back and look at the 2016 GOP nomination polling, even this early, and then this early, and then later into when the contest began, you would see that John Kasich, Ted Cruz, and others, there were people routinely in the 20s against Trump, who would be in the 30s. And when it became clear that Trump, and Robert K. Haley tried explaining this to people on Maria Bartiromo the other day, Trump won the nomination last time with a little over a third of the vote. Once it started to become clear he was the front runner, it was inevitable. Then he got to 40 and 45. He never got to where he is now. The position he's in right now is super dominant, super dominant. And nobody has even been able to achieve what like John Kasich and other candidates, Ted Cruz, achieved in 2016, 15, and 16. They're nowhere near that level of support. They are in a few polls. You'll see DeSantis at 20-something in a few polls, 23. But these polls have been bullish on DeSantis for a long time. And even the DeSantis bullish category, the YouGov dataset, Quinnipiac, the Marquette poll. All right. Well, I don't know where Marquette is going to be more recently, but they're way out of they're an outlier in the Republican nomination significantly. So DeSantis is losing 2-1, even Maris now almost 3-1 in a head-to-head, and yet the Marquette poll has it close, like 5 points. I mean, that's an outlier. That's crazy. But overall, when you look at the totality of the polling here, DeSantis isn't even where Ted Cruz was, or John Kasich. This is another decline. He was at 16 last month, and now he's at 14. Pence got a 4-point bump, it appears. These are voters that are just shifting around. And then Trump obviously gained from a bunch of these others. His ceiling is much higher than 59, 60 in a Republican primary this time. His ceiling is closer to 80 something. It was 80 in the New Hampshire Journal poll. His ceiling was about 85%. Folks, New Hampshire is, everybody knows. If you're going to charge it, well, not everybody, but everybody in this field who knows what they're doing and has been around a while knows that if you're going to mount a challenge against an incumbent president, for instance, it better be in New Hampshire, because they're the ones who are the least consolidated in a primary around something like a front runner or an incumbent, or in this case, a former president. So the fact that Trump is still at that level is impressive. And he beat Ronald Reagan's, who were followed by Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, by the way. He beat their record. Reagan had the record. He beat Reagan's record for the share of the vote of an incumbent in New Hampshire. So the fact that he's still, and that he did it at around that level. So the fact that he's still around that level really shows you that his ceiling is much, much higher, and that his position is much stronger than it even appears in this polling. All right. So DeSantis is one of the few who did not get a bump, whereas Pence did have a bump, at least in the Harris poll. And again, I don't know what ours is going to show nationally. We'll find out in the next national poll. But I can tell you in some areas, he did get a bump, in some states that we are doing, in some districts. 3 in 4 GOP voters think Trump will win the nomination. That's this is overall 53 to 47. Who do you think will win is a strong predictive indicator. In fact, the only exception to that in a presidential election is 2020. Voters overall thought Trump was going to beat Biden. And he was yet another anomaly. I don't have to worry about it. We can talk about this on YouTube now. Yet another inconsistency, yet another anomaly in the data. One that, is a first, for instance, a first time for a certain thing to happen in a general election. And for just the record, now that we're allowed to do it again, an anomaly, something that deviates from what is standard, normal, or expected. Example, there are a number of anomalies in the 2020 election results. That's my example of anomaly. All right. But among Republicans, this is significant. All right. Because that's who's going to be largely voting. A Republican primary won't be, and we've gone over the nomination map. We'll go over it again. A lot of contests are closed. Trump beat Scott and DeSantis easily and head-to-head among Republican voters. And no, I didn't mute. I'm just looking at the trend real quick before I say something that's not true. It appears that Trump is just gaining. This month, DeSantis was stagnant, but Trump is gaining. Out of the current field of Dems in the primary race, Biden is the runaway favorite. And this is the consolidated race. Yeah, that's about where we're at. 62 to 15 to 8. We're at. And again, this is just so crazy how close we're at. 61.1 for Biden, 13 for Kennedy, only 4 for Marianne Williamson, 10 for someone. Oh my God, that's exactly what they have. You see what I'm talking about? This is crazy strange. Crazy strange. And then unsure 12. Most continue to say they have doubts about Biden's mental fitness and age. On Friday, I tweeted something that I want to say again here. I want to repeat here. Let me get a drink of water. Remember that from Dark Mirror last night, Laura?
I was just hysterical.
I did that for you.
Oh, thank you, love. I love you too.
You guys ever watch Dark Mirror? It's funny stuff, but there's one where like it's all in the future, like their thoughts or something.
It's not made for children. Don't have your kids around.
It is not. So the system, pairs you up with people, and this girl got this guy who was like supposed to be super sexy and really good in bed, but every time he took a drink of something, he went And it was just like, Laura noticed it immediately because she's a woman and she's looking at the guy, right? And, you know, like as from the view of a woman, I'm a guy, so I didn't notice it. But she was like, oh my God, is he going to do that every time? And
It's
you
like, that's going to get old real quick.
yeah, that's going to get old real. And I'm like, do what every time? And she's like, you don't notice every time he drinks? He goes, and then she caught it. I guess all women are better at that stuff. But also, you know, you're looking at it from that point of view. And I said on Friday, and I'm going to repeat now, that in many ways, this is the worst poll for the anti-Trump alliance yet this cycle. It's all over the poll. It's not just that Trump is ahead of DeSantis 59-14, which is, of course, an enormous lead. I mean, folks, it's 45 points. It's enormous. It's not just that. We're going to get into some of it now. Mental fitness for Biden. I have doubts about his mental fitness. 59%. 41 are not. He's too old is a super majority. And by the way, in the Rasmussen poll that we just went over, the questions that preceded the head-to-head matchup that were really bad news for Biden. When only 20% of independents do not think you're corrupt, you have a real problem. Trump wins a hypothetical horse race against Biden by 6 points, against Harris by 7. Again, look at the margin here. Super, super close to what everybody else is generally finding. Trump leads with independents, by the way. Again, this is important. And he's taking 11% of Dems. This is very close to what we have, whereas Biden's only taking 5% of Republicans. We have it with party, and I think and by the way, they have independent other. They're doing something we do, which is there are third-party candidates in this country, third-party voters in this country. A lot polls are going to have to get a little bit more. What's the word, Laura? Believable, I guess, is the word.
You mean accurate?
Realistic. No, realistic. Like it's not right. Yeah. But it's not just that there are independents or unaffiliated. There are third-party voters in this country, and they count as a share. And that's something, especially people who wait for party. Anyway. So Trump leads 47-40. So a little bit up from last month, which was, oh no, I'm sorry. He leads 45-39, almost identical to what Rasmussen has, or it is identical to what Rasmussen has, almost identical to what we have, because we have Biden at 38, I think, if I remember correctly, right? Just go back. Yeah, 38.1, Trump at 45. Last month, they had Trump at 47 and Biden at 40. DeSantis, oh no, we're not there yet. Trump leads Kamala Harris by 11. Against Harris by 7? Oh no, yeah, 7 this month. It was 11 last month. 47-40. So I see what they're doing. It's just a little bit odd, but DeSantis is this is a split race. So it's 41 for DeSantis, 40 for Joe Biden. That is well within the survey error. That is a tie, and it was tied at 42 last month. This is not a great result against Kamala Harris. DeSantis should be winning, and winning pretty significantly. 42-40 is not great, and being tied last month, that's not a significant improvement. Most say Trump should not run for should Biden for a second term, and same goes for Trump. However, again, this is a largely binary choice in this country, and I understand Cortez and other make the argument that the country deserves better than two people they don't like. I'm not sure the country deserves anything, Steve. We have allowed this country to become a totalitarian, almost banana republic. And I'm not sure we deserve anything. It's a matter of what we need at this point. You know, and that's the way the voters feel about it. Would they rather see somebody else? Sure. But you can say, should they run? Do I want them to run? And then also ask, are they the best to equipped to deal with this? And that's the paradox that the DeSantis people are having a trouble dealing with right now. They want someone new. They just don't see any of the new options as someone who is the right person for the job at this time. And that is a problem because a presidential justification, like we spoke about a lot, and again, even Larry Sabato did a good job on the CNN panel or on his appearance after the announcement, explaining this to people. You need to tell voters why you are the person for the moment right now. The only person who can deal with the challenges of the country right now. And that's an issue. No Republican has been able to make a better argument than the one that Trump has. And Jay, one of the commenters and watchers, locals members, he's always right. You were right from the beginning about it, Jay. There was a major problem to be able to overcome simply just telling people, I've been there before. I've done this before. I have a record. I've done it already. This person's promising he's going to do this. I did it. It's so hard to beat that. Issues. Here we go. I don't care about the taxes. That's not what, although this stuff is interesting. I've said this a million times. You would think these people, as loud as they are and the representation they have in the media, you would think they act like they're the majority or something. They are the minority. The LGBTQ, etc., activists, they are in the minority, the gross minority. And if we have time, there's a story I want to talk about that as soon as I started tweeting it, by the way, like a whole bunch of other people started pretending like they saw this story and started to talk about, in fact, exactly what I was talking about. And I'm going to try to get it, but this is the problem when the media does this and interferes like this, because then the end result is in the inevitable internal contradiction that was going to come as a result of the media lying and gaslighting like this. This is a gross minority. Only 23% favor a law that would allow gender-changing surgery and puberty blockers for minors without parents' permission, which, by the way, I'm a little bit surprised it's even that high, but social bias people are afraid. Do you think that surgery to change gender and puberty blockers should be allowed for minors under 18 or only be allowed for people over 18 years old in your state? By the way, for the people who say, 10% don't like Trump. Well, 10% think that minors should be able to get puberty blockers. 13% of Republicans think that favor a law in their state that allows it. Voters are largely split on banning abortion after 6 weeks and oppose abortion rights up until birth. Listen, I've said this a million times. Nobody, no polling firm on the face of the earth has done more in-depth research on abortion than us. Republicans screwed the pooch in 2022 because they were cowards, plain and simple. In 2016, when Donald Trump simply turned to Hillary Clinton and said, "You rip babies out of the womb, you're a disgusting woman." That's all you ever needed to do. And it horrifies Americans, but then it makes them think, do they really support that? You might have noticed USA Today, PolitiFact Wisconsin, blah, 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 or PolitiCheck, or whatever it is. They all tried to run to her defense because they knew that was damning. And in the end, Trump was telling the truth when the fact checkers to this day still have that up as a false claim. It's not a false claim. Republicans just did not argue the issue correctly. And actually, Life News, which sends me emails, but I don't know why. I never signed up for their list. I got on someone's list, and I'm getting bombarded with all these conservative newsletters. Somebody sold my email, I guess. But they just put out a story the other day from Gallup, and it was really a whole host of polling that's come out since the 2022 midterms that show that Americans' views on abortions are now returning to the mean again after the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Dobbs. The media lied about what it was that law did. And they obfuscated what was in question and what people believed and their views. The truth is that while a small lead for pro-choice is kind of persistent, when you drill down to the views, Americans are actually more in line with Republicans when it comes to their views on abortion. They're not in line with people who want to ban 6 weeks and under or ban altogether. They're not. DeSantis took a risk to try to beat Trump in Iowa by backing that law. That's going to hurt him in like damn near every battleground state. It's going to be difficult to overcome if he was to nominate. However, the pro-choice movement begins to lose their own supporters at the stage of a heartbeat. When you get to speculation over whether babies can feel pain at 20 weeks, they begin to lose almost a majority. And for the heartbeat, by the way, 30%, almost a third of pro-choice voters don't support abortion by the time the heartbeat is detected. Pro-choice. Almost half do not support abortion anymore once we get to the 20-week mark. And a majority, significant majority, does not support abortion after 6 months or in the late stage terms of a pregnancy. In Gallup, should be legal, or, in this case, in that case, their new polling just showed that, in fact, most Americans do favor significant restrictions, even ones that the media paints as extreme. Here we have Harvard, Harris, basically backing up our polling and the polling that others have released. Do you favor or oppose a law in your state that would ban most abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy? 53% oppose it. That's too early. And Robert Cahaley, by the way, did a lot of work for Republican groups before the midterms. They just didn't listen to him. He found largely what we found, that the 15-week mark is a much more acceptable time frame. Anything before that, Americans have a hard time digesting. So the 6-month ban is -6, or the 6-week ban is -6. But would you favor or oppose a law in a state that would allow abortion rights up to the point of birth? Almost a supermajority, which is what we have, 66% for this, oppose that. They have 64. Very, very, very close. 2/3 of voters say illegal immigrants should not be allowed to get licenses and should be discouraged from settling in the U.S. Obviously. This is guns increase restriction 54. The gun rights movement is, I would argue, is most definitely taking a hit. They're not making their case. I don't care about tax issues. Charter schools, I do. Charter schools have always been popular. Always. All right, here we go. Here is part of why I said this is, in many ways, arguably the worst poll of the cycle. Not just the primary. The worst poll of the cycle for the non-Trump alliance. And when I say non-Trump alliance, I mean obviously Democrats who do not want Donald Trump to win, the Biden folks, and then Republicans who do not want Donald Trump to win. Most voters say the case against Trump is strong. Have you heard about it? Yeah, I've heard about it, 81%. And blah, blah, blah. Is it a strong case? Somewhat weak, right? So 58 to 42. However, he's probably guilty is 44. He's probably innocent is 30. He may be guilty, but he should not have been charged 26 because it interferes with the election. This is huge. In other words, people are saying, I don't give a damn. This is election interference. They either say that, the vast majority either say that, or they say that he's innocent. However, do you think Secretary of State Hillary Clinton mishandled classified information? 72. Do you think Hillary Clinton obstructed justice? 69. Trump doesn't get anywhere near these numbers. What about Biden? Do you think Joe Biden mishandled classified information? 65. Do you think indicting a former president for taking classified documents after leaving office is fair or selective prosecution? Whoa. Selective prosecution +6, a majority. Notice they did not give them a chance to say, I don't know. Do you think Trump's indictment is a valid indictment or politically motivated? Politically motivated, 55. Do you think it's a fair application of the law or interference, election interference by the Department of Justice? 56% election interference. Do you think it's a reason to him for withdrawal? 51-49. Very, very close. Do you think it'll help him or hurt him? 50-50. Do you think he'll be convicted or acquitted? He'll be acquitted 57%. But even if he's not, because that's really a redundant question on the other one, even if he's not, should he be pardoned? 53. This is absolutely damning for Joe Biden, the administration, who thinks they were going to politically hurt him or take him off the ballot. You're going to cause an uproar taking him off the ballot. But it's also damning for the I'm running for president, hoping for Donald Trump to be jailed crowd. Because let's be serious. There are 2 candidates, 3 if you count Nikki Haley. But Mike Pence and Ron DeSantis are running, and their strategy has been, I need him to be jailed. Laura, just from the other room, in case you didn't hear, just said so sad. But it is 100% true. If you can't win on merit, you shouldn't be running at all. Right? That's Laura's 100% correct. That's what she said. She's 100% correct.
You're so sweet. Thank you.
Voters want more transparency on the information and potential cases involving Joe Biden. 83-17. Not really investigating Joe Biden. 55. Biden lied. He did discuss his businesses with his son. 2/3. Gets worse. Do you think that Joe Biden took a bribe? 57. Folks, holy beep. This is a complete sham and a banana republic. Right after the report, almost 60%, Laura, almost 60%. I just don't. I know. And you would think after the Durham report that Merrick Garland and the Justice Department and the FBI would be more conscientious about, would be more conscientious in being more fair. And I'll just listen. I saw this mentioned a bunch of times. Again, I don't talk about platitudes with election analysis. Donald Trump is not ahead by the margin. He's ahead in nationally and losing states like Arizona and Georgia. Okay. That's just not going to happen. Right. I mean, if he's ahead by that much, other things are going to fall, you know? There's just no doubt about it. Let me get into, let's read the story first, because I'm going to move on. I do want to bring this up. Oh, come on. Well, it just sucks. Let me grab it from the original source because it's making me want to open Apple News and I can't put that on. Who was it again? Hold on 1 second. Give me 1 second, guys. Let me get the original source of who this was. Okay. Hold up. I'll get it. We'll have to talk about this storm at some point too, because, geez, it's just these ads are just horrible. When your ads are like over part of these things in your website, I've never used their stupid little search before. There we go. Okay. Got it. I got to bring this up. Because I see others sharing it after I did and brought this point up. And I'm glad, because others should be talking about it. Barnes immediately retweeted it because it's something Barnes and I have talked about a long time. And I think it was going back to like 2015 when Robert first saw some of the polling we did on this. And why it's important. Context matters, and we're going to talk about that. But let me put it up on the screen. Okay. A sense of betrayal. Liberal dismay as Muslim-led U.S. city bans pride flags. Before I even get into it, why a sense of betrayal is the question. Let's get it. Many liberals celebrated when Hamtramck, Michigan elected a Muslim-majority council in 2015, but a vote to exclude LGBTQ plus flags from city's property has soured relations. In 2015, many liberal residents celebrated as their city attracted international attention for becoming the first in the United States to elect a Muslim-majority city council. They viewed the power shift and diversity as a symbolic but meaningful rebuke of the Islamophobic rhetoric that was a central theme of then Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's campaign. Here's the bullshit that drives me nuts. It wasn't Islamic phobic if it's true. And here we are. It wasn't just big data poll. It wasn't just Donald Trump. Pew Research. We had polled it, and let me see if I can I don't know if I can find it. It's so old. But we polled this, stuff like this, but we polled more to the heart of it, folks, which is, do they believe? Do Muslim Americans believe? And we polled it in 2015, 2016, 2015. Do they believe that U.S. law is sovereign? Or do they believe, or not even that the law is sovereign, do they believe that the Constitution is I forgot how we worded it, I'm trying to find it, but has the ultimate say in what is and what is not constitutional or legal? Or if the Constitution contradicts Muslim doctrine, Islamic doctrine, and faith, should it be ignored? And a majority overwhelmingly believed that Muslim law and Muslim tenet has got to be put before the Constitution. So here's the truth. I don't know why there's a sense of betrayal at all. They never lied to you. You lied to yourselves. Polling from Big Data Poll, Pew Research, I believe Rasmussen did it a couple of times. Others have done it. It's very clear, folks. Very, very clear. They did not believe. They are the most anti-same-sex marriage demographic out there. And the left always made it out like white evangelicals were the major problem and source of hate for these groups. Laura said, because Laura, there's nothing in Christian evangelical faith that says they should be thrown off mountains or anything. I mean, it's just the truth. But everyone was so afraid to talk about it. But all of these polls made their views very clear, even back then. Forget about, we didn't even know about the new LGBTQ activists' goals. You know, we didn't even know about their agenda back then being what it is now. Puberty blockers for minors, cutting off your winky, you know. We didn't know any, we didn't really talk about that. That was fringe stuff. We simply asked about same-sex marriage. You know, whether or not it should be legal. They never lied about it. And they do not believe, they never lied about those views, and they never lied about the fact that when it comes to those views and others, religious doctrines supersede U.S. law. Liberals lied to themselves, and the media lied to these communities. And here we are now with the obvious result of what Marx would call an internal contradiction. And yet, they seem to feel stunned by this. They're shocked. They can't understand. Maybe because back then, when we were releasing those polls showing very detailed results, showing concerning results, people like Barack Obama were running around saying 99.9% of them share our values. That's just not true. It's simply not true. Isn't called Black Mirror. Black Mirror is a show. Yeah, did I say it wrong before or something? Yeah, it's called Black Mirror. And the reason it's called Black Mirror is because Black Mirrors were used for like divination. And then the idea of the show is really to show you what it's like. And by the way, one of them is about like getting rid of the credit system for a social ranking system, like the Chinese have put forward, like many American liberals have put forward, by the way. And one of those episodes is about what it would look like, what society would look like if it was a social credit system and not a merit or credit-based system. Crazy stuff. But it'll blow your mind. Just don't watch it with your kids. But you know, much of it you'd absolutely love. And there's, you know, word on this I want to bring up here, but this week, many of those same residents watched in dismay as a now fully Muslim and socially conservative city council passed legislation banning pride flags from being flown on city property that had, like many others being flown around the country, been intended to celebrate the LGBTQ community. Muslim residents packing City Hall, you ready? Erupted in cheers after the council's unanimous vote. And on Hamtrak's social media pages, the taunting has been relentless. I'm not going to say that because, you know, F-less City read one post, emphasized with emojis of a bicep flexing. And listen, I'm not judging these people at all. I'm not reading this to judge them. I want to be very clear. I'm not reading this to judge these people and make them out to be like bad people. These are their sincerely held beliefs. They never lied about them. Ever. Now, maybe you have some groups like CARE and others who claim to be human rights organizations. They are not. And they said they believe in dignity and equality for all people. You have people like that are liars. Sure. But for the most part, folks, these communities at large did not lie. They didn't lie to pollsters. They didn't lie to media. The media lied to you and lied to these communities. They fabricated stories. They found the 1 in 100 Muslims who would support it. When the truth is, it is not acceptable in Islam at all. They chose to make the white Christian, or Christian in general, even though they gave black Christians a pass, because the second highest opposing group is actually black Protestants. But they need their votes. They need the votes of Muslims. So they got a pass. White Christians vote to Republican. So they became the danger to the rights of the LGBTQ community. It's talking about with my buddy Andrew, who is Charlie Kirk's buddy, Charlie Kirk's producer. And he's totally right. I don't know what evangelical churches or non-denominational Christian churches any of these people have been to, but none of the ones I went to were haters. To each his own. I don't approve of it, and I don't support it. But it's for God to judge. It's for me to love. Amen, sister. Amen. I have never been to a white evangelical church that made comments like that. Never. Yet they became the media's stigmatized scapegoat. In a tense monologue before the vote, Councilmember Mohammed Hassan shouted his justification at LGBTQ supporters. I'm working for the people, what the majority of the people like. He is. While Hamtrak is still viewed as a bastion of multiculturalism. The difficulties of local governance and living among neighbors with different cultural values quickly set in following the 2015 election, which has been ignored, folks, right? All through Trump's administration, totally ignored. Some leaders and residents are now bitter political enemies, engaged in a series of often vicious battles over the city's direction, and the pride flag controversy represents a crescendo in tension. There's a sense of betrayal, former Hamtrak Mayor Karen Majewski, who's a Polish American, said. We supported you when you were threatened, and now our rights are threatened, and you're the one doing the threatening. Well, you're an idiot, Karen. How appropriate of a name for you. You're an idiot. You lied to yourself. They never lied to you. And that's where I'm leaving it off. What is the answer? The answer is you cannot have multiculturalism in the way they see it does not work. The United States was a melting pot, meaning, yes, there were some parts and elements of the identities of all the people that came to America that stayed and, melted with the rest of the country. However, you still melted into one national identity. They don't believe in a melting pot. They believe in a mosaic. Well, you know what the problem is with that? You take something hard and you drop it in a melting pot. Wait long enough and it will melt. And it will become part of the contents of that melting pot. But you take that same thing. Let's call it a ball of ice. Drop it in the melting pot. It may take a while, but it's going to melt and it's become part of the melting pot. You take that same ball of ice and you throw it at a mosaic and it cracks. Mosaics are a nice thought, but a weak foundation to build your society upon. It's a weak foundation for a family. It's not reality. It's not real. It's a weak foundation for a family, and weak families mean weak communities. Weak communities mean weak townships, towns, cities, whatever. Weak towns and cities mean weak states. Weak states mean weak nations. Balkanization never works. You know what it does lead to every single time? Right. Somebody's got to go. That's a shame. That's a shame. I'm listening to Laura. Yeah, that's the difference, though, Laura. That therein lies the difference. That's what I'm saying. That's the difference between the melting pot philosophy and the mosaic philosophy, which now I think somebody put it right there. They tried to change it to salad bowl. It still doesn't work. It's just simply not the case. You know what the problem is with that, Jonathan? The salad's going to rot.
Not only that, but a tomato is a tomato and a lettuce is a lettuce and a carrot is a carrot. That's a problem with a salad bowl.
Yep.
When you're a melting pot, that means all of you has congealed together and then it's one.
And with a salad bowl, Laura, taking enough time, it's not going to melt into one. It's going to fester. And a tomato is going to rot the spinach, or the spinach is going to rot the dandelion, or the dandelion is going to rot the romaine, and the romaine is going to rot the whatever. You lose that melting pot philosophy, you don't really have a nation. Not according to any definition of what a nation is. Benedict Anderson, Imagine Communities. That's the one but there's others. There are others that had, that came before Anderson that would have argued something very similar. Although Anderson, I think, just really adds the cherry on the top. That he brings up, actually, right? Imagine Communities, he brings up why America's identity is really something different and special. Whereas others, they all had their own way to develop, shared glory, shared pain, shared suffering, but even though these communities were imagined in America, nevertheless made them real. And you can do that with different people from different backgrounds as long as you have those key elements. And unfortunately, that's what we've lost. So you can't really have that, right? The melting pot is stronger, Eric, much, much stronger. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, they didn't come because they wanted to be Italian and only Italian and not listen to U.S. law and blah, 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 blah. They were very proud to be Italian, but they were even more proud to come to America. That's the truth. Italy has its beauties, but there's a reason they left. And they're never going to ignore that reason. And we're going to ignore the reality of why they wanted to come to America in the first place. And that being Roman Catholic didn't matter. They still adopted the Protestant ethic, the ideas of British common law, the rule of law, property, right? The idea of property, personhood, what makes you a citizen. They're totally different thing. They inherited that. They did not bring their ideas of being, a fake citizen, by the way. They didn't do that, and the ideas of Europe, which are really not. I mean, again, you're not a citizen. You, in the sense that we know citizenship. So I don't know what they're feeling betrayed about. You deluded yourselves. You put your head up your ass and you thought that you projected your beliefs once again onto somebody else. They weren't lying. They were never lying to you. You just decided that you didn't want to believe it. You wanted to believe because if you did, it would break your overall worldview. And your overall worldview you would have to confront is a flawed one. It's one that does not have logic behind it. All right, we only have a couple of minutes. I do want to say this real quick before we move on. I just want to bring this up. All right, as of Sunday, let me get the exact, and I don't mind if we go over a couple of minutes. We started a few minutes late. Let me get the exact. Hurry up. Here we go. I'm getting the exact update here so I don't forget. The Virginian terror. All right, so as of Sunday, June 18, 2023. Yeah, the map has all the current information for nearly all of the contests, save for the following exceptions that are missing specifics for delegate allocation, meaning how will they be done, winner take most, winner take all, proportional, and the allocation rules. All right. Now, there are many that have dates that are basically presumed dates or to be determined. But we know what month they're going to be in, and we know what generally, even what day, if they're not official yet. The Virgin Islands Territorial Caucus. Here is the first exception. Neither delegate allocation nor allocation rules are really known yet. We know only that it'll be held sometime in May, and that, of course, there are 6 delegates available in what is a closed caucus and convention/convention. Why do we do caucus/convention? Here's why. In the case of territorial caucuses, could be different with others, but in the case of the caucus in the Virgin Islands, it will meet from noon to 6 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time on St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John is a convention. So caucuses in the first two, and in the latter, in St. John, it's a convention. 2, the closed caucus and conventions for North Dakota and Wyoming will be held sometime in March, each with 29 delegates. Specifics for delegate allocation, are not clear for either contest. Allocation rules for North Dakota are available, but only very basic and limited information is available for Wyoming. The Oregon primary requires clarification. This is the third and the final. On allocation rules, we need a clarification. There are a rules conflict between the old and the new, and one has not been repealed. And then here is specifically, if we take a look at it. All right. And I wrote here. The new rule states that delegates are bound. Jeez, we're dying. Batteries are dying here on the mouse. I hope it doesn't give me an issue. You may have to take this out. All right. So roll down. Okay. So the new rules state, and I want it to be specific. Delegates are bound to the winner of the statewide vote. No threshold. Winner take all. However, the original state to compute the number of delegates each candidate receives by taking 31 delegates, the overall amount for Oregon, that the states take that, times it by the candidate's statewide vote, divided by the total statewide vote, and round down to the nearest whole number. If too few delegates are allocated, round up those candidates with the largest remainder until all delegates have been allocated. All right. And that's kind of what we mean by rounding rules. A couple of things we need to go over. Also, with the idea, and I answered this on Twitter, we've gotten emails, social posts, asking what total qualified vote means. All right. In some states that are proportional or semi-proportional, maybe a winner take most / proportional, depending, maybe that the districts are winner take most, but they have at-large delegates that are bonus delegates and whatever, that are proportional, and they have an equation that relies on the total statewide vote or total qualifying vote. It is the sum of all of the vote received by candidates who qualify to receive delegates. Let's say a state has a threshold of 20% in order to qualify for delegates. There are 120,000 votes cast in that primary statewide. And of course, I'm being easy here. But only candidates who met 20%, when we add those votes together, so candidate A and candidate B, one got 50,000, one got 40,000. Everyone else was below 20% with their share of the vote. Then we only add up those two candidates. One, candidate A got 50,000 votes, candidate B got 40,000. So the total qualifying vote is only 90,000. In many of the states where there is a threshold, and we're talking about the computation of delegates, they will use total qualifying vote, not the total statewide vote. There are exceptions, one notable one, but there are exceptions. However, when it says the equation to compute delegates and it says total qualifying vote, that's what we mean. We do not mean the entire vote statewide. All right. That's a great question. A lot of people caught that. I mean, that was like the number one question. What the hell does total qualifying vote mean? All right. That's what it means. Okay. Any other ones like that, send them to us and we'll do our best to answer them over time. Are working on the Democratic map. In fact, it's really almost done. It's just that there's so much that isn't known yet with Democrats because they're doing everything they can to make sure that Joe Biden doesn't really have a problem at all. All right. So last thing, it is already June 19th. Okay. At the end of the month, the fee for a supporter on peoplespundit.locals.com is going to increase slightly, but albeit slightly, but it's going to increase. So if you want to be grandfathered in, sign up before the end of the month. YouTube, go to community if you want to make that jump, or even if you just want to become a supporter on Locals as well. But if you want to make the jump from being a YouTube member to a Locals supporter, there's a code in there to offset 2 months for you. All right. So it takes off what you've spent in the last 2 months for YouTube off of the price of Locals. So do it and do it before the end of the month, because otherwise you won't be grandfathered in. We haven't settled totally yet. I got a call with them to, look at comparable communities to see what they've done. And I'm not going to try. I will do my best to come in below that. However, just, the bottom line is this: we are in piker territory at this point compared to what others have done. And the stuff that we put up costs a lot more money. So, we held out for as long as we can. But if you're in it already, you will be grandfathered in. So that's important to know. All right. And I'll have more details on that, but it's going to end in June at the end of this month. So sign up before the end of this month to be grandfathered in. Even if you sign up for the monthly, not the annual, you will still be grandfathered in. All right. And I believe that's for like a year, but I'll check, or at year end. All right. I'll check and I'll get specifics for you. With that in mind, that's it. Right. Quite frankly, is next week. Steak for breakfast on Friday. I'll remind you again, but don't miss it. Share the public polling project, folks, far and wide. Let's get another one national out there, okay? People's Pundit, .locals.com. It's always up there. But also, if you just look in the description in every video, the public polling project link is there. bigdatapoll.com/public-polling-project. And that's it. That'll take you there. But again, the best way is to just look in the link description so you don't mess up trying to type it on in. Share it far and wide. If everybody gave $1, we'd easily be able to poll every single month, probably multiple times a month. All right. Wednesday, don't miss it. We are going to have the author of the awesome Federalist column from last week about 6 reasons why the Trump indictment is problematic. Will Scharf, I think is actually how you say it. He's current candidate for Missouri Attorney General, but he's worked on 2 appointments to the Supreme Court. He was a former federal prosecutor, the former Missouri governor policy director. This guy's been around. He knows a lot. He knows his stuff. And he wrote an incredible article last week on Friday that ran in the Federalist about 6 things that really concerned him about the Trump indictment. And I can't wait for him to come in and talk about it. But with that, we'll see you on Wednesday.
And we both hope that you had a very happy Father's Day. To all
I
those
did that.
daddies out there.
Yeah, I did that in the beginning. Being a father, gentlemen, for those of you who are a father, even if you're not, being a father will be, if you eventually you will be one, it will be the most important job you have in your life. All right. Never forget that. Society falls apart when we all don't do our roles. You cannot, despite this new movement, it's not partisan to say this, it's reality. You cannot defy the laws of nature and nature's God without consequences. So it's important that we take the time to realize the roles and the benefit that these roles play in society. Because when we don't play them, look at what is happening. Country suffers from mass mental illness. We're on the brink of bankruptcy. It all starts at the bottom. It all starts with the fundamentals. It's like the building blocks of protein, folks. All right. Wednesday, noon. Thanks for watching. See you soon.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but you don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette.